Salvete discipuli. This is the last chapter 3 video for us to watch. This is lines 14 through 18. Remember, after this, you should be answering a discussion question along with our usual comprehension check, so make sure you do both activities. Remember what we did when we last talked? We talked about Orgetorix's conspiracy. He has gone around and he has gotten some other chiefs to ally with him. Of course, these guys aren't chiefs yet. He wants them to stage coups in their tribes to become chiefs. And the first one was Casticus, a Sequanin, who he wants to take over. And there's a little bit of precedent for him taking over because his father used to be chief, but it is not a hereditary position in Gaul. And the second person that he wants to get on his side is Dumnorix, who is an Aeduan. They're a little further into central Gaul, as we looked at in the map the other day. And what's trickier here is Dumnorix's brother Diviciacus is chief. So having Dumnorix become chief means he is betraying his brother. And to sweeten the deal, Orgetorix offers Dumnorix his daughter in marriage as an attempt to persuade him. So that was where we left off. And now we're going to get into a little bit more about what these individuals promise to each other. So we start with Elise confirmat. So Elise here is dative indirect object with our main verb in the present tense confirmat. And that's going to introduce an indirect statement that is going to go through the rest of this sentence. Now, before we get into that, I want to point out what's going on with the verbs in those indirect statements. So set is our subject. That's going to be reflexive back to Orgetorix, who is the subject, understood subject of confirmat. But you'll see that I've circled obtenturum and conciliaturum as our verbs. And you might be saying, wait a minute, those aren't infinitives. And you would be right, that form on its own isn't usually considered an infinitive. But one of the things that you're going to have to get used to in real life Latin, especially with the future active infinitive, is sometimes we leave out the verb to be. So you have to understand that here with these. You have to understand that he would be supplying an essay. We do this in English all the time, right? If I was going to say, are you going to watch the video? That would be a full grammatically correct sentence. But I could also say, you going to watch the video? And I've left out the are. I've left out our verb to be. So this is something that we do in English all the time, and is something that happens in Latin all the time. Because remember, Caesar is concise. He doesn't want to waste his time with unnecessary words that he thinks his readers would understand belong in there. So all of that stuff early on where we had to reapply verbs, and here where we have to understand the verb to be is pretty normal, and we call this ellipsis. That's the technical term, ellipsis. Okay, so now that you're aware of that little grammatical thing, let's dig back into our translation again. So he confirms to them, right, or he assures them that, and here we start our indirect statement. He will obtain, right, we're understanding essay here, and then our direct object is imperium, the command, and we have a genitive with that. We usually have genitives with ideas of ruling, so the command of his tribe. This is, if you want the technical term, what we would call an objective genitive, because what are you commanding? You're commanding his own tribe. So that's the first thing he promises Dumnorix and Casticus that he will do. And he promises, right, he confirms to them that he will conciliaturum, he will acquire, and he's going to acquire regna. This is neuter accusative plural, so he'll acquire kingdoms for them, Elise, and he's going to use two things to do that. Suis copiis is our first ablative of means, with his own troops. And, right, we get from the que suo exercitu, with his own army. You might think that those pretty much seem like the same things, and you would be right. Exercitus implies a little more formal training as opposed to troops. We could also understand too that copius is not troops but resources. So he's going to use his own resources and his own army. And then that doesn't seem as repetitive. So either would work as a translation for copiis, either troops or resources. Okay? So that's the first thing that we have in our translation today, a nice shorter sentence with an indirect statement in it. The second sentence gets a little bit more complicated. Now we're going to get what they as a group do. So adducti, this perfect passive participle, is going to be what we translate first. It's nominative, and we're understanding that as modifying Demnorix and Casticus, right? So having been persuaded, and then we have an ablative of means, by this speech. Hoc, don't be alarmed. This is from hic haec hoc, so it means this, and it modifies orationi. We get the English word orator or oration, and that is a speech, or somebody who gives a speech. So having been persuaded by this speech, they give a pact, right? Fidem here is some kind of pact, faith, loyalty, promise, right? So they give a promise, and they give a jus jurandum. This is super technical. This is a sworn oath. This is a big deal. And we have the prep phrase here, inter se, between them. So they give a pact, and they give a sworn oath between them. And then we have an ablative absolute. With the kingdom seized, or after the kingdom had been seized, then we go all the way down to sperant, they hope. And this introduces an indirect statement that goes from per to posse, which is why we have our square brackets here. So they hope that they, sese is our subject, that they themselves can, that's our main verb, obtinere is the complementary infinitive, they can obtain, and we have imperium, command. So really similar to how command was used here, command of his tribe. Here they're going to say they want to obtain command of totius Gallii, of all of Gaul. And how are they going to do that? They're going to use the prep phrase here, per. So per often means through, but it can also be used almost like an ablative of means. So we can translate it as by here. By their three. And then we have two superlatives, very powerful and very strong people. So they're hoping that with these three tribes united and their sworn oaths together, that they will be able to rule all of Gaul. All right. So this is their plan for, Gallic domination. So nothing too crazy here with grammar. If you found some of the grammar here confusing, the biggest things you'll want to review are ablative absolutes like regno, occupato, and we had, I think, one in the previous chapter, too, other ablative absolutes there. And we had two indirect statements here, one in the first sentence from se to conciliatorum, and we had one from per to posse. So definitely review your ablative absolutes and your indirect statements if you're finding this tricky. You can look back on our previous unit when we did indirect statement and ablative absolutes and watch those videos if they're confusing, okay? And if you're having trouble finding those videos, send me an email and I can link you to them. All right, and if any of this was confusing, if you're not getting this, don't hesitate to drop into my office hours on Monday or send me an email to set up a meeting, okay? We can definitely work our way through it. Don't struggle alone. All right, your reminders. Don't forget you have your usual check-in to make sure that you comprehended the chapter and you know what's going on both with the content and the grammar. But remember, this is the end of chapter 3, so you also have a discussion question to complete. Remember that 4 and 5, they're their own self-contained chapters. We're not splitting them up, so you'll have discussion questions tomorrow and the next day for those. So make sure you've paced yourself and you are working diligently. If you have any questions, reach out to me. In the meantime, stay safe and healthy, and I will talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.